Okay, everybody exhale. Woo! What a football game we just watched. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are here once again on Syracuse Football Postgame presented by Krause Health. My name is Brent Axe, and put it on the list, folks. Think of any game-changing, classic, back-and-forth, wild affair that has taken place in the then Carrier Dome, now JMA Wireless Dome. The newly named JMA Wireless Dome gets its first instant classic in what at first was a pretty dreadful football game. 9-3 at halftime. Syracuse's offense, after cruising down the highway in the first two games, popped all four tires and was waiting for AAA on the side of the road as they could not connect. Sean Tucker not playing well, Garrett Schrader not playing well, but that Syracuse defense kind of played bend but don't break and kept Syracuse in that game enough, even though Aiden O'Connell was dinking and dunking and picking apart that Syracuse defense. They go into halftime, they're down by 6. And boy, did this game turn, not only in the second half, but particularly in the fourth quarter. One of the wildest fourth quarters of football I have ever watched, Syracuse or otherwise, back and forth. Just when you think Syracuse has it, they take a 10-point lead at 25-15. Purdue goes right back down the field. Syracuse gets the ball back with 2 minutes and 53 seconds to go, looking like they can ice this thing, but for some reason, they pass the ball twice. They only take off 37 seconds off the clock. They hand the ball back to Purdue. But I'll tell you what, folks, you know what Purdue wanted to do today? They wanted Syracuse to win because they just kept giving Syracuse opportunities. So many penalties, not only on the last drive that gave Syracuse life, but a couple of drives in the second half that just kept giving Syracuse opportunities. The Orange used up all 9 of their lives, and they come up with a 32-29 win. Let's jump in the comments early here because you guys are fired up. Mike saying, what a great win for Syracuse. Armand says it best here. Cardiac Hughes was ever present once again. Antonio checking in from L.A. What a win. Reminded me of 1987. Yeah, think of all the great games in Syracuse football history. And they got by on the hair on their chinny chin. But ultimately, this will be remembered as a win, and Syracuse goes to 3-0 on the season. Williams says, what an incredible fourth quarter. It was so insane. I couldn't keep up with that fourth quarter. I've got a best and worst column up on syracuse.com right now. I don't even know what it says. My brain was just going 100 miles per hour in that fourth quarter, as I'm sure yours was. And as Dan says, I ran out of blood pressure medication midway through the third quarter. Kevin says, Axe, what the heck did we just watch? Kevin, I don't know. But what I do know is Syracuse won that game 32-29, and it was wild. It was wild, wild stuff. A lot of cardiac use in there, right? I died and came back to life several times today. Says Sean, you guys are bringing it with the comments here. Jack says, forget basketball season. We got us a football team. Brent Axe right again. Called it. You dialed it up. And look, once in a while, Uncle Brent's right about these things. What I said during the week is that this game would bring Syracuse some adversity. This game would be wild. There would be turnovers on both sides, that Aiden O'Connell would throw the football. Did I expect it to play out like that? And, you know, there's some things here that Syracuse has to answer for, but sometimes games get so messy. You know, you do what you have to do, and it's in the first 2 letters of the word survive. SU survived this game. Schrader played terrible, but delivered to Aronde Gatson, not only on the last play, the 25-yard score with 7 seconds to go. Go back earlier in the fourth quarter. That was all Gadsden, by the way. Schrader escaped out of trouble, got him the football, and there's Gadsden just zigzagging down the sideline and scores, right? Look, the defense gave up some big plays late, but they also made some stops in the fourth quarter that they had to make. Not their best day. The mob, as it's called, the Syracuse defense, when they look at this film, they're going to cringe a few times based on what they saw, but they made some plays in the fourth quarter. I thought special teams was great. Andre Schmidt missed a kick, but he crushed a 50-yarder. Syracuse had some big plays on special teams in this game. It was just absolutely wild. Here's what I want to do, guys. While you guys keep going in the comments, we'll highlight some more as we go here. I just want to recap the fourth quarter. Usually we look at all the numbers from this one. Let's just go back and look at the fourth quarter because it's 9-3. 9-3 at halftime of this game. And then things get crazy in the second half. So give me a second here. I am going to just recap what we saw in the fourth quarter of this football game, because that was a game in and of itself. You almost forget what you saw in the first three quarters of the game. Just worry about the fourth. Okay. Fourth quarter. Aiden O'Connell throws to Payne Durham, who was just terrific today for Purdue, frankly. 11-yard score, and that puts Purdue up. Let's see here. Now I'm looking at the wrong thing, guys. Sorry about that. Give me a second here. Sorry. Just trying to get my bearings here on this whole thing. It's so crazy. Just trying to find out what happened in one quarter of play is just wild, right? Just absolutely wild. So I don't know if I can narrow it down to let's just go through the sequence that happens as we go through the last part of this football game, right? And just the scoring, the back and forth, the craziness in this thing. If I can find it. You guys keep chatting in the comments here for a second, because I've got to go over this just to get to wrap my head around how nuts this thing was down the stretch here. So let's start here and we'll go backwards, right? So Andre Schmidt, after a penalty and a long sequence and a review, hits the extra point to put Syracuse up 32-29. It was Schrader to Gatson 25 yards to put Syracuse up 31-29 before that, right? All right, I'm just going to bag this, because what I'm looking at here is not what I need to see here. But guys, you know as well as I do how wild that fourth quarter was. The back and forth that we saw in this football game, it was absolutely insane. There are some numbers we do have to look at here, because while I think Sean Tucker will certainly be pleased with his win in a team win, untypical game for Tucker running the football. He had 42 yards in this game. Average 2.3 yards per carry. Purdue did a great job locking him up, centering on him. That Purdue defensive line was terrific in this game. Schrader had 83 yards rushing, and a lot of times Schrader had to tuck and run because what he saw down the field wasn't there. Purdue's pass rush and their coverage in passing was great in this game. So Arondé Gatson does end up with 6 catches for 112 yards with those big plays, including the huge touchdown, the 46-yarder in this one. Just 5 different receivers catch the ball today as opposed to 9 last week against Connecticut. You want to see that number diversified here. But Schrader, after having one of the most accurate first 2 weeks in college football, struggled to throw the ball for the most part today. Delivered certainly when it mattered in the end, but 13 of 29, 181 yards, 3 touchdowns on the day for Schrader throwing the football. And when you look at some of the team stats in this one, the one you grab the red pen and go over time and time again, Purdue ends up with 13 penalties for 138 yards. Syracuse had 9 penalties for 74. They kicked themselves in the foot way too often. Syracuse was just 3 of 13 on third down, where Purdue was 10 of 17 on third down. Like, so many numbers swing Purdue's way in this game, but they just kept saying, no, you guys win this one, right? We're good. We're okay. We're going to be gracious visitors to the Dome. Thank you so much for having us here, but we're going to let you win, like time and time again. Purdue had 25 first downs to Syracuse's 23. All told, Purdue ran 77 plays, 485 yards. Syracuse ran 65 plays for 306 yards, which is well off pace what we saw in the first 2 games under Robert and I's new offense for Syracuse. But the numbers don't always tell the story, friends. As we saw today, this was the consummate example of how numbers don't always tell the story in a football game, because what mattered was what happened down the stretch in the fourth quarter. And remember, there is a short turnaround here. Syracuse will play Virginia on Friday night at the Dome in the Robert and I Jason Beck Classic. The former Virginia coaches face their former team, and it's going to be an electric night at the Dome after an electric afternoon at the Dome. Didn't start that way, but it certainly finished that way. So let's let you guys react to this, because you're just living the dream today as a Syracuse football fan after somebody said it well, living and dying about 14 times. Clayton says, living in Virginia right now, but I'll be at the Dome Friday night. Speaking of that, coming back to talk some trash. Love the Friday night games. Fill that Dome. Allison says, Tucker not able to get anything going, in my opinion. The defense is a lot to work on. Gave up a lot of points in short order, but Schrader remained cool, calm, collected, What a leader. Yeah, it was surprising to see Garrett Williams give up some big plays today. Look, Charlie Jones is a great wide receiver. What a pickup for Purdue. That kid is an absolute player, and I'm glad to see him get an opportunity when Iowa kind of shoved him aside, didn't get him the football. He made some terrific catches in this game. He had to leave the game for a bit. What appeared to be a rib injury, comes back in, diving plays, and getting by one of the better cornerbacks in the ACC. Garrett Williams typically doesn't give up that much deep. Deuce Chestnut making some plays late, but then misses a tackle late. A lot of guys in that secondary. Allison, as you said, that defense just overall had a rough day. Bend but don't break. I love that Tony White made the adjustment. First half, it was a lot of soft zone coverage, laying off, giving the receivers room, and Aiden O'Connell took what the defense gave him, dinking and dunking his way up the field. They played much more aggressively, got some pass rush going. Caleb Ochukwu, how about the pick six? I thought it was over right there. Learned my lesson. There was like 14 huge plays after that, but O'Connell gets pressured by Jatius Greer, and Ochukwu runs back a pick six. Put Syracuse up 25-15, but you kind of glanced at the clock, and you're like, there's a lot of time left, especially with a guy like O'Connell that can just chuck it down the field, and he did that to Charlie Jones a couple of times, and what we got was just an absolutely wild football game. As Blake says, I thought we lost it multiple times in the fourth quarter, only to come back again and again. Does the Purdue coach who got the unsportsmanlike penalty have a job on Monday? Yeah, how about Purdue help Syracuse out with 2 unsportsmanlike penalties on special teams? I've never seen a team kick off from the 10-yard line, but we saw it today. Courtney Jackson returned it to the 50, and Syracuse was given enough room to get that final score. Time after time after time, Purdue helped, and that was the biggest one of all. As Tori says here, Purdue totally lost their cool in this game. After a few times, frankly, that Syracuse lost their cool in this game. Mike says it here, the fourth quarter was really the whole game. It was like 2 different things. The first 3 quarters, I don't even know if they count. That fourth quarter was everything. It's one of the wildest fourth quarters of football I think I've ever seen. Jeff says they need to address the lack of ball control. The line could not handle Purdue's front 4. Gadsden was the MVP, according to Antonio here, and I think some great points made by both of you gentlemen there. How about Gadsden, by the way? Now, you know how much Uncle Brent loves it when they throw to the tight end. I almost don't even think of Gadsden as a tight end now. He's more of a flex receiver. He's more of just, you got to put a different title on him. He's not the best blocking tight end. They put him in there more as a target to get open. And that touchdown, when he weaved down the sideline, I mean, the 25-yard throw was great. He got separation. Schrader put it there after Schrader struggled to throw the football all day and put it where it needed to be. But that touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown, where he zigzagged down the field, was a hell of a play. And he's the son of Aronde Gadsden, a former Miami Dolphins wide receiver. So he's kind of he's a combination. If he's a Frankenstein monster of a wide receiver and a tight end, and Syracuse will take it because he has made some huge, huge catches. Remember, he had the big touchdown against Louisville earlier in the season as well. Tom notes it here. Syracuse had no answer for their wide receivers. They got open a lot. They got open in the flat. Eventually, they did get some pressure on O'Connell in the second half. But, guys, that guy's playing in the NFL. Like, there were just some throws he made where you're just like, I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do about that, right? He was a little more mobile, escape pressure better than I thought he would on certain throws, but he's putting the ball only where Purdue receivers could catch it a number of times. So I think you got to factor that in. But look, Williams and Chestnut got challenged today by a real quarterback. And I got news for you. Syracuse is playing some great quarterbacks down the stretch. Brennan Armstrong has not had as good of a year without Robert and Jason Beck by his side, but still a talented quarterback coming to the Dome Friday. You got Devin Leary coming up in a couple of weeks for NC State. And, on the list it goes. There's some teams that I think are a little more vulnerable at quarterback than I would think. I think DJ Uiagalelei is certainly a quarterback Syracuse can handle. Notre Dame's got a quarterback issue right now. I like Kaidon Slovis at Pitt. Sam Hartman's as good as it gets at Wake Forest. That's not till way down the road on the schedule, though. So there's some good quarterbacks still to come. And O'Connell was about as good as it gets, and Syracuse certainly survived on that one. I got my defensive touchdown this week, Dan. I should have had it last week, right, with Marlowe Wax Jr., but his knee was down and the whole thing. But you just kind of smelled it. It was coming. It was there, and we got it today. Big man touchdown. Always love the big man touchdown. Rumbling, bumbling, and stumbling into the end zone, as the great Chris Berman once said. Greg says, most bonkers game in the Dome since. That's a great question, Greg, because there's been some close games in the Dome. There's been some back and forth games in the Dome. Think of the Wake Forest game that ended the 2019 season when Trill Williams runs back the fumble for a touchdown. That fourth quarter wasn't quite as wild. It was a close game, but it was as wild an ending, a walk-off ending as you're ever going to see in a football game. So that was bananas. The Clemson game wasn't quite as wild as this one, but it was a close game. Upset brewing, back and forth game for a bit, but Syracuse takes control and wins, right? I'm going to forget a few here, but that's a great question to throw out there because there's been close games. There's been back and forth games, but this game was just flat out bananas. Remember that Northwestern game in Ryan Nassib's senior year? I think Syracuse ended up losing that game, as a matter of fact, in 2012, but that was a wild game and a wild fourth quarter to boot. More will come to mind. You guys look up some and remind me of those I'm forgetting off the top of my head here, but a fair question to ask because that is about as wild as a fourth quarter as you will see after as boring a game and dreadful. It was a rock fight for a while, and then it turns into this absolutely bananas football game here. Rob, always appreciate your insight, saying Purdue had a really good game plan for Tucker and disrupted the rhythm of the passing game throughout the game. Our guys would have lost a game like this by 17 points last year. The orange juice we're being served up this season is made up of different stuff. And through 3 games, Rob, I think that is a great observation. This team is just different. And I think it's, if you want to point to something tangible that you can look at here, it's experience. This team's got 17 starters back, a quarterback who knows it's his team and is more comfortable. He had his rough spots today, don't get me wrong. You got a all-world player in Tucker, who, as you mentioned, was held in check by Purdue, but I'll take Sean Tucker on my team anytime. An experienced offensive line. The receivers are all over the place, but you got a Courtney Jackson. You got an emerging talent in Arondé Gatson. On defense, think of Garrett Williams and Mikel Jones, 2 guys that could have gone to the National Football League but came back, right? Deuce Chestnut plays like a junior. He's only a sophomore, but plays like an experienced guy. I think that's huge when you have that many players back that went through the ringer last year, all those close games. That had to pay off today, right? Don't panic, stay in it. Other teams in the past would fold here. And again, there was some choke-like moments, if I'll say. I don't know what the heck Dino was doing when they got that ball back with 2:53 to go. Run the football. Make Purdue burn their timeouts and take as much clock as you can out, right? Why you throw the ball twice and then run on 3rd and 15 to set up a punt. And think of at the end of the first half, too. There was a time management situation that Syracuse botched. 2 timeouts in their back pocket. Remember, Purdue had the ball first. Syracuse had played terribly in the first half. They needed points. They needed something, and they screwed that up too. So that's been a weak point for Dino. That's got to be addressed, right? But, how you grow from that, how you overcome that and get in that situation again. Let me use another example here. Go back to the Louisville game. That Garrett Williams interception was on a route, on a play that Louisville had just burned Syracuse on time after time in recent years and almost burned him again on that play. But Williams recognized it. He got there. He made the play. It's just recognition in the moment. Experience teaches you that. And there's just certain things you can't teach. Either you have guts or you don't. Even you know how to react in these situations or you don't. When you can just play in these tight situations and not think, that's huge. And I think that's what's paying off here. I think that's the stuff you're talking about, Rob. And that was a really good comment on that. Greg notes here, these heartbreakers are ones Syracuse usually loses, but we underestimate Purdue's cursed status. Talk to a Purdue fan sometime and they'll tell you underrated, cursed fan base. Yeah, they blew it against Penn State earlier this year and now lost another tough one here today to the Orange. There's my man Jermaine who says, Brent, bottom line, they got away with today, but next Friday we might be so lucky. Virginia's not to be underestimated coming up on Friday. Let's see. Yeah, big play here. Torrance points out, blocked extra point. How about that? Special teams matters. I thought Syracuse played really well on special teams today. Put aside, the missed field goal by Andre Schmidt. There was a play where they almost lost a punt, but the defender kind of got blocked into, who was it, Courtney Jackson, I think, who was returning the punt. And I don't fault him for that. That was kind of a weird thing, which that was another break that went Syracuse's way when they didn't get a turnover on that play, right? But that blocked extra point, it just showed you, like, okay, the offense isn't playing well. Purdue's in control, but they're in this thing. And yeah, they almost ran it back for 2. What a block that was by Clark, who got up there. And then I don't remember who ran it back. Was that Jason Simmons who ran that back? I'd have to go back and look it up. But special teams matters, folks. Shameless plug. Wrote a column about special teams a couple of days ago. I think you should check that out, because what stuck with me in doing that column, I talked to 7 players last week, and every single one of them, when I brought up special teams, their eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. Mikel Jones even said to me, like, I've been waiting for somebody to ask me about this. Like, that's how excited these guys are to play on special teams. That's that stuff Rob was talking about, that these guys, this is an important year for them. This is big time for them. A lot of those guys that could have left, Jones, Williams, Andre Schmidt, Chris Elmore, who unfortunately got hurt, and a couple other guys came back, used their extra year of eligibility, wanted to be a part of something here, right? So now, look, they're a 3-0 football team. If you can beat Virginia Friday night, not to be underestimated, as Jermaine pointed out there, but I think certainly a winnable game. They're 4-0. You're going to beat Wagner the week after that. Bye week NC State. Could they be 5-1 after 6 games? Dare I say 6-0? They're going to get AP votes now. They won't be in the poll this week, because you don't go from being, I don't even think they got any votes last week. As a former AP voter, I can tell you it's a process. You got to work your way up the ladder a little bit for those 60-plus national writers to really recognize you. But you'll get on the radar today, beat Virginia, you're in the poll. I think if they beat Virginia, they're 4-0, they're in the poll. Depends on what happens at the bottom of the poll, too. A few teams have to drop out to make way for you. But that's what's on the line here. That's how big this win was. That's how big beating Louisville in game 1 was, that what they have set themselves up for this season. And think of the confidence that comes from getting a win like this, right? I'm sure it'll hit social media. I can only imagine what the Dino Baber speech will be after this one. Maybe it's already out there. But, boy, we haven't had a good, hearty Dino Baber speech in a while, right? So maybe we'll get one of those coming up here. Allison says, heard the Cuse was overcoming some sickness this week. Practice was thin, explains the slow first half, but they definitely came to play in the second half. I was wondering about that too, Allison. They did look a little slow. They did look a little off, right? But also noon game. First game was 8 o'clock. Second game was 7 o'clock. Noon game after that. Players will tell you they just want to get on the field. They don't like waiting around all day for those primetime games, but, you get a little more juice under the lights, particularly that Louisville game. There was a lot of buzz behind that one, right? Easier said than done sometimes. You roll out of bed earlier. You're trying to get yourself going. The crowd was great again today, but, they didn't see a very good football game in the first half, so they hung in there as best as they could. I wondered about that and how that noon game would affect this, and that was my theme all week, that Syracuse would face some adversity but win the football game. And that's what they did today. Almost got the score right, too. I said 34-30, 32-29, give or take a little bit. There you have it. Daryl, good to see you, my friend. Says, Axe, the fact that this team played a full 60 minutes is absolutely amazing. Lost my voice at the Dome. Thanks, Brent, for all you do. Thanks for checking in, Daryl. Love that Bills helmet you got going there, too. Hopefully the Bills can keep up their success going forward here Monday night against the Tennessee Titans. Thomas doesn't have a voice left either. My voice is shot. Hell of a game by the Orange. Jim notes that Gatson and Gear are emerging. Greer, I believe, is what you mean, Jim, right? On the defensive side of the ball. What a player Gatson's become. I mean, look at the clutch touchdowns in the fourth quarter, the zigzag down the sideline, but he got open for the winning score. There's a trust there with Schrader. I think that's really one of his primary targets now. You had Courtney Jackson at the top of the list, and I know that Schrader loves to throw deep to Alford, but you can tell the connection that's developing between Schrader and Gatson at this point. Really great to see. Scott brings up an interesting point. How about when Carlos Del Rio Wilson came into the game, right? Schrader got a little banged up, still on the sideline. Carlos Del Rio Wilson, in one of his only plays out there, scrambles out of trouble, steps forward, throws on the run, on the money. They brought the play back because there was a penalty because he stepped over the line of scrimmage. But if and when they got to develop him as a quarterback. Scott, you put it best. That guy's just showing tremendous promise. And it didn't come to fruition today, but I'll remind you guys about the backup quarterback at Syracuse and how important they are, because the last quarterback that went wire to wire in a Syracuse football season was Ryan Nassib in 2012, either mostly by injury or sometimes performance. Remember, Schrader replaced Tommy DeVito last year by performance. The backup plays at Syracuse. Carlos Del Rio Wilson got in today. He got into the first game too because Schrader lost his helmet a couple of times, and fluky thing there. You got to come off the field for a play when that happens. But if he's developing and getting confidence, and look, you can't replace game experience, right? He didn't get the game experience he was probably looking for like he did in the Connecticut game where you're in a blowout, but real-time game experience, you can't replace that. And he made a hell of a play. So someone to keep an eye on at this point, no doubt about it. Ira says, I'm not taking anything away from Syracuse, but Purdue handed them that game. Points to Syracuse players and coaching staff for keeping their composure. Look, Iris, there's no doubt about it. Purdue did everything they could to help Syracuse win this game. Okay, that's the dirty little secret here. Penalty after penalty after penalty after penalty, including on the last drive. And those were Big Ten officials, right? If I'm Purdue, I can't wait to see some of the conspiracy theories from Purdue fans on Twitter and other places. Somebody brought it up earlier about how they're a cursed fan base. That was a Big Ten officiating crew today. So thank you, I guess, is what Syracuse fans are saying to them. But man, Purdue saved their hide a number of times. I couldn't believe how many times. It felt like every penalty. Think of the first touchdown to Gatson. That drive, that was like a 17-play drive. There were two huge penalties on Purdue that helped Syracuse move forward in that. Or that, no, that wasn't Gatson. I take that back. But that 17-play scoring drive, I do know Purdue had two penalties on that drive that pushed Syracuse forward. My brain is so scrambled right now that so much happened in that game. It's going to take me 3 days just to process it. But hey, we'll all take it, right? What a game it was. Entertaining game to say the least. Fernando says, Q-Stat here. We tend to evaluate games from position-related stats and skill sets, but we forget 50% of the game is mental. In that department, Syracuse blew away Purdue. We were much more disciplined, resilient, and poised at the end, and that was the difference. Yeah, Syracuse was not committing special teams penalties that forced them to kick off from the 10-yard line. The 10-yard line. I have never seen that before. A kickoff. I've seen plenty of punts from the 10-yard line. Never seen a team kick off from the 10-yard line. So you got that too. A little bit of everything at the JMA Wireless Dome today as Michael recounts what a lot of us said here. Blood pressure all over the place. Yeah, that Cardiac Cues t-shirt, that has been a wise investment for Syracuse fans because you can use it over and over and over again. As Mike notes here, Purdue took that game from Syracuse with 2:44 to go and with 44 seconds to go. Syracuse took it back. That's all that matters, right? Scott says, thoughts on Schrader trying to do too much. Scott, I'd like to see the film on this one. I want to see the all 22 because I want to see what Schrader was looking at. I got the side view, as most of you got the side view. There were so many times he had 3 or 4 solid seconds, and that's forever when you're in the pocket. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. Couldn't find a receiver, took off and run. Didn't throw the ball away at times that he needed to. 13 of 29 today after only throwing 10 incompletions, and frankly, about 6 or 7 of those were drops coming into this game. I hate to be I told you so, but I said this during the week. I said this on Orange Weekly. I said this on my radio show. I said it on Twitter to anybody that would listen. He's going to have a bad game because the clip he was going at was, credit to him for doing it, but it was just such a blistering pace that someone was going to bring him back down to earth. Now, I think Schrader could still have some of those games he had in the first 2 games of the year against some opponents coming up, but he was 20 of 23 last week. I know how bad UConn is, don't get me wrong, but that's just insane for a guy who couldn't throw the ball last year. So you knew adversity was going to strike at some point. It did today, and I think he's experienced enough that they learned from it, but I think you also have to give some credit, Scott, to Purdue. They locked up Syracuse receivers. You could tell on a number of throws that Schrader just didn't see anybody open. And that's the benefit you have in Schrader. You don't have that benefit with Aiden O'Connell. If his receivers are held up, that dude can't run. Okay. Schrader can get you first downs and keep the chains moving and get you 6 or 7 yard chunk plays when something's not there. Right. So I'll give him that. But there certainly were some times today that, boy, I just looked at it and I said, what is he looking at? What's he seeing? Literally, because, there were times right when the play clock was coming to an end and he called his own number a little bit too much today. But, picking nits at this point based on how Syracuse won this game. Jason saying they did it. What a game for Schrader. Ups and downs, but stepped up when needed. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Rob with a good point here that Clemson's defensive coordinator from last year is Virginia's head coach. He's going to draw up some things that will give Schrader fits at times as well. Great point there from Rob. And I think we'll end on that point, guys, because I need to do some more exhaling, as I'm sure you do. What an incredible football game. What an incredible fourth quarter. One of the craziest in the history of that building for sure. And the Orange come out on top 32-29. They take down Purdue today. We'll be right back at it here. A couple of programming reminders. Orange Weekly comes your way Thursdays on these same channels that you're watching on now, or you can catch the replay on YouTube, on social media, and on a post on syracuse.com. But we're live Thursdays at noon if you want to come back on all these channels and chat with us as we're doing now. Friday Night Lights, Syracuse in Virginia, Friday night, short turnaround. We'll be back here Friday night. After that one, could the Orange move to 4-0 after that win, after a huge win today? What a game at the Dome, 32-29 win over Purdue. My thanks to you again for coming by and hanging out with us here. I hope you guys enjoyed the rest of your weekend. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health for presenting Syracuse football postgame. And everybody go take about 1,000 more exhales and come down off the high of this one, because it was a heck of a football game. Sports, right? You got to love it. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.